Hey everybody, and welcome to the Motorsport Podcast. My name is Pat Mackesy, and on this podcast, we're sort of going to talk about things on the new age side of motorsport and the auto industry. So, sim racing, rallycross, new tech, hybrid tech, things along that nature, anything that's current going on right now. And lucky for us, this is an easy week to start off. Lots of changes going on over at Ford. Big news last week, they had an investor call and revealed that they will be discontinuing their small car lineup in the United States. So no more Taurus, no more Fusion, no more Focus, no more Fiesta. You're just going to get hatchbacks, F-150s, Mustangs. So big changes, big changes. And I want to talk about this because, as I'm sure anybody who's listening to this is, I'm a car guy, so for me, I'm not a fan of this. I think it's a relatively short-sighted move. Anytime gas prices go up, consumer preferences can change on a dime. That's been proven time again. You look back at the crisis, the financial crisis in '08. That was the whole reason that the American automakers were struggling, was they put too much emphasis in gas guzzlers early on, and they got caught out once gas prices went up. Right now, gas prices are down, relatively speaking, but they're still hovering around $3. If they continue to go up, maybe Ford will be okay because they think that the hybrid options that they're making available will bring their overall gas mileage down across their lineup. But that's assuming people will buy those hybrid options over the gasoline options. And it's a risky strategy. If you have cheap, efficient cars that younger people can buy, it's more likely that you're going to sell those cars once gas prices get high, in my opinion. And another reason that I think, for enthusiasts especially, this kind of feels like a betrayal, is that Ford has been touting over the last 3 years their small performance cars, the depth of their Ford Performance lineup, which, to Ford's credit, was second to none. I mean, they had subcompact Fiesta ST, compact Focus ST, the F-150 Raptor, Shelby GT350, the regular GT Mustang. I mean, it was the Ford GT supercar. No other car brand comes even close. You could argue maybe Honda, because Honda has the Type R and the NSX, but they don't have an off-road truck to compete with the Raptor. They don't have a smaller hot hatch to compete with the Fiesta ST. So it was a big surprise. If you look back in November of 2016, Ford put out a press release titled, "Ford Hot Hatch Buyers Stay on EcoBoost. Registrations up over 21% in 2016. And the very first line in this article reads, "Retail registrations for non-luxury turbocharged small hatchbacks are down 21% in 2016 as buyers are snapping up SUVs. That's not stopping Ford from posting just over a 21% gain in new retail registrations through September of its new hot hatchback models, Fiesta ST, Focus ST, and Focus RS." That was a big selling point for Ford at that time. Their hot hatchbacks were bucking the industry trend. Everybody was going SUV, everybody was going large vehicles, and there were people flocking to Ford because they had options that weren't that. And if you look again in May of 2017, it continues. The Ford put out another press release saying Ford's sporty cars winning over younger, more affluent buyers even as consumers shift to SUVs. And this is an important point, because here they're not just talking about the fact that not only is Ford selling small cars at a time when people are flocking to SUVs, they're selling them to younger buyers. And anybody who knows anything about marketing, that's the group you want. You want to go for that younger demo so that you can get them hooked young, because brand loyalty, especially in the auto industry, is important. And it's ironic because in that earlier November 2016 press release, Ford says, Jessica Bishop, Ford Focus brand manager, says, for decades, we heard criticism from customers that Ford sold its best cars only in Europe. Yet in 5 short years, we've built a reputation here for making very serious, affordable performance cars with our Focus ST and Fiesta ST 1-2 punch, says Jessica Bishop. Buyers now know Ford is committed to affordable performance. Well, apparently Ford is not committed to affordable performance, because if you want an affordable performance car now, you're going to have to go for a Mustang, which affordable compared to, say, a BMW 3 Series, yes. But when you're looking at a Fiesta ST, which I picked up mine after rebates and all that and trade-in, it ended up costing $3,000 below MSRP, so around $17 or so. Payments are affordable, given the college rebate, and that's just not the case anymore. You're not going to find options like that. So it's frustrating for people who like small cars, who want performance but don't want a giant muscle car. And so one of the big questions that everybody has now is why? Why did Ford suddenly make this radical decision to stop selling small cars in the U.S.? And by and large, the consensus is that it was just to appease Wall Street and investors. Nick Bunkley of Automotive News tweeted that the day after Ford made this news, the stock went up 2%, GM stock went down 2%. And a JP Morgan analyst said the decision was, quote, the sort of bold and decisive action we believe investors have been waiting for. And yes, it's a bold and decisive action, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good, bold and decisive action. It seems to reason that if you're in May of 2017 saying how these 2 specific models are helping you snatch up young millennial buyers, because it's talking about how the average age of a Fiesta buyer is 45 years old, and the average age of a Fiesta ST customer is at least 10 years younger. That's a significant difference. So you're basically saying you no longer care about snatching up younger buyers. You're going to rest on your laurels and let consumers who are already Ford fans come to you for the trucks and crossovers that they want. Anybody else can kind of go elsewhere. And especially for somebody in my age, that's disheartening, because you just get out of college, and I know for me, first thing I did when I got my contract and started saving up a bit of money and was able to go buy a new car was I went out and I got a Fiesta ST. No other company made it so that I could buy essentially my dream car, a turbocharged hatchback, hot hatchback, arguably one of the best hot hatchbacks in the industry, for an affordable payment every month, and it's reliable, and it's safe. You want to know how? I know because I was in one. I bought one in 2016, and somebody slammed into the back of me on 95, pushed me into another giant Ford Taurus in front. My car got totaled, but I was fine, and I got another one because the idiot had good insurance. But again, jokes aside, it's a bummer, because it was clearly an attention grab for Wall Street. And we kind of, in a way, should have seen it coming, because Jim Hackett was brought in as CEO to replace Mark Fields because investors weren't happy, because investors wanted bigger return on their investment, and they wanted Hackett to cut costs. And we've seen him doing that. We've seen him changing Ford's direction away from the things that Fields prioritized. We saw Ford pull out of the World Rallycross Championship, pull their factory support for Hoonigan Racing, who was running the Ford Focus RX. And that also, at the time, it could have signaled something like this was coming, but it also not necessarily, because the Focus RS was on its way out, at least in its current form. And so pulling the marketing effort in Rallycross sort of made sense in a way. But looking back on it now, it definitely seemed like that was a step in this direction. And now they're discontinuing cars altogether. And it's one thing I think should be noted is, for the Fiesta and the Focus, okay, fine, those probably aren't that profitable. And as many people have said, without an ST or an RS badge, not many people wanted them. But with a car like the Fusion, that's a good looking car. In the Fusion Sport spec, it's a good looking, quick car. Yes, they don't sell a hell of a lot of them, but if you're going to get rid of the Taurus as well, why not just keep that around so that you have a bigger car option for people who still want a sedan? Because not everybody wants a crossover. We are still out there. The people who want cars still exist. So it seems like this might be an end of an era for Ford. The early 2016s were a great time for it. I mean, the early 2000s, early 2010s. From one Ford GT to the next, winning Le Mans in 2016, building up the Ford Performance lineup to what it was, running a factory WRX program for the first time. It was an impressive time for Ford, and it seems now they're going conservative again at a time when companies like Honda and Toyota, which had gone conservative for an extended period of time, are coming back to their performance roots. Honda with the Type R and the NSX, Toyota with the upcoming Supra. So I don't agree with the decision by Ford, and I'm as a fan, I'm disheartened because this Fiesta will probably be the last Ford that I ever buy, because in all likelihood, I live in an area where rear-wheel drive and a V8 isn't the best decision, so I'm probably not going to ever be a Mustang buyer. Important to note, though, one kind of good thing did come out of all of this, in that we got an interesting partnership in Rallycross. Because Ford pulled factory support for Hoonigan's Focus RS-RX program, that program is essentially dead in the water. Andreas Baccarat had moved on. Ken Block is no longer running in the WRX this year. He's running select WRC events. Just rally events. And so everybody thought that that car would not be running next year. However, on April 16th, we get a press release from Lowenbro Motorsports that Lowenbro had partnered with Hoonigan, because Lowenbro was in GRC, but as many of you I'm sure have heard, GRC has gone bankrupt. The series is no more. They're trying to start up again in 2019, but we'll see what happens with that, because their big name drivers, their big name manufacturers are all gone. Volkswagen, Subaru are in the new America's Rallycross Championship, as is now Lowenbro with Steve Arpin. So you got Steve Arpin, Tanner Faust, Scott Speed, Chris Atkins, Patrick Sandell, all the big name veteran GRC drivers have moved on to ARX. And frankly, the Hoonigan partnership might be one of the most interesting aspects of this new series, because you have Lowenbro, which is a small independent operation which had been very, very successful in GRC. They were giving the VARX guys, the Andretti Rallycross guys, a run for their money every race. And I got to go to a GRC event at Thompson last year for the first time, and to see those cars running is impressive. But to see how closely Steve was running to them every single race, his pace was phenomenal. And as he noted when I talked to him this past week, they were running 2014 Fiesta equipment. So they were in dated equipment. They were an independent operation. They were smaller than Andretti, obviously. Andretti had essentially endless amounts of factory support from Volkswagen, and yet they were giving him a headache every single round. And Steve is a fast driver, so with the new car, with the support of the Hoonigan guys, with the experience that they've gained running this Focus already in WRX, that's going to give them valuable data that cannot be underestimated. The importance of learning how to drive these cars on the type of circuits they're going to be doing is something that is critical. And the guys at Volkswagen and Subaru are going to have to do that on the fly, whereas Steve's already come into this with a bit of a leg up. He's got 2 years of data from Andreas and Ken, both running these cars in WRX. And so they're going to be strong right from the get-go. And as I said, I got a chance to talk to Steve last week, so I wanted to give you guys a chance to listen to that interview and find out exactly how this partnership came to be and what he thinks of where Rallycross stands in the United States now and what's coming down the pipeline.
So I imagine you've had a pretty busy off season, considering everything that's going on.
I've really built up my frequent flyer miles this year. We'll put it that way.
How far is it from you to Utah?
Well, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, so honestly, it's been trips to Utah, trips to San Diego, trips to Los Angeles, trips all over the place on the West Coast for sure. Trips to Montana. So, but like from us to Utah, it's here to Denver to Salt Lake, and then drive over to Park City.
Oh, that's a long drive. I was just over there last week in Salt Lake City. I actually went to the Ford School.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So kind of curious about that. How did you guys kind of get in touch with Hoonigan? Was it they were looking for a partner to continue the Focus program?
No, honestly, to be perfectly honest with you, the Focus program was kind of shut down with Ken and Ford decided not to continue with it on the World Rallycross side, and just new opportunities started kind of opening up, and things started changing on the Rallycross landscape, if you want to call it that. And where the Hoonigan thing and the Ken thing opened up was Ken and I built a really good relationship back in 2014-15, racing against each other on the GRC side of things. And we've just stayed in touch over the years. And so I just called Ken up and talked to him about what's going on, and that was the start of it. And next thing you know, we're out in Los Angeles and then Park City and all over the country. And what started out as just small basic conversations just kept on getting bigger and bigger, and here we are today.
Crazy. So when do you get your first test?
Oh God, I don't know. We got the cars about 3 weeks ago, and our guys are digging day and night working on these things, doing a lot of development work to them, and we got honestly we're kind of dependent on lead time right now on a bunch of parts and whatnot. So I would say the first time we'll fire up the engines and be on track would probably be mid-May sometime.
Got you. Has he kind of given you any?
I would say probably the end of May.
Oh, okay. So even a little while. Has he given you any sort of tips on the difference? Because I know he went from a Fiesta to a Focus too, and even when I was driving the two road cars last week, you can kind of feel a difference in the wheelbase just with the road suspension. So I imagine that'll be a bit of a transition.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the race cars. The Focuses have a lot of great parts to them, a lot of strengths to them, but they've also got a lot of weaknesses too. And so basically what Ken and I have spent a lot of time talking about, and we've learned a lot, and we've came a long ways with our Fiestas over the last couple of years with all of our load road developments that we've done. And they obviously learned a lot on the Focuses in their couple of years on the WRX side of things. So we really compared a lot of notes, talked about the strengths of both cars and ideal ways to combine all those strengths into one package. And obviously the ultimate goal is to take the weaknesses and try and minimize them as well.
Cool. So how are you feeling about, I imagine ARX will probably be like the European style rallycross rather than the American style?
Yes, sir. It's going to run just like the WRX.
Yeah. So are you feeling a little bit uneasy about that, or are you looking forward to the challenge?
I look forward to every challenge. It's with change comes opportunity, right? So I could just, if I work my butt off and work harder than the other guys, I'll be one step ahead of them by the time we get to the first race. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Does it like concern you a little bit that, say, like a guy like Tanner Faust has experience in WRX and the VWs going into this season kind of had the pace advantage?
No, I think they're totally beatable. I think we proved that last year on a single car 2014 version of a Fiesta. We're beating we're one of the only cars that was consistently competitive with them. So I think combining our group with the Hoonigan group and these new Ford Focus RSRXs, I think they should be the ones concerned, to be honest with you.
Definitely. Is that so? Based on kind of what you know about the car so far, do you expect to kind of be right up there with them right out of the gates again, or is it too early to say?
It's motorsports, right? So you always expect to be. I definitely. My expectations are to go out there and start winning races. What happens is always an unknown. These guys are digging as hard as possible right now on our end, but the reality of it is the VW guys, the Subaru guys they've been digging all winter too. So ultimately we shouldn't be able to go out there and be competitive, but we if you go by what we should be able to do and shouldn't be able to do, we should have never even had a chance at being competitive with those guys with what we've had. So I would say you got to look at all those facts and throw them out the window and just go by previous performances. And that being said, I have the utmost confidence in our guys, our team. Really excited to have Ken on board, to have someone to bounce information off of. And Ken's obviously a marketing genius, but also an incredibly capable and talented race car driver. So to be able to have a teammate like that is going to help me elevate my game as well.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to touch on that because I saw that there was a bit of a marketing aspect to the partnership too. Will we expect to see you kind of doing some of the online video things that Ken does and the Hoonigan guys do, and sort of the livery reveal type stuff?
I know there's still a lot of details to be ironed out, but the reality of it is I've got to sit at the table for a lot of fun conversations, and there's so much stuff going on. These guys got a full schedule, and the parts of it that I'm going to be able to be a part of, I'm incredibly grateful for, and I. Basically, it looks like it could be a fun summer. It could be a very fun summer with a lot of cool stuff to be a part of. We'll just see how it all plays out.
That's awesome. So I'm kind of curious, would like after your racing career, because I know you're now teammates with Ken, you've raced against Reese Mill and you raced against Tanner. Would something like stunt driving, would that kind of pique your interest?
I was trying a little bit of that this morning on my way to work, and I destroyed my Jeep on the way to work. So it's not going good so far. But yeah, anything like that. Honestly, just driving vehicles is incredibly fun for me, and honestly, the business side of motorsports too. I'm at the shop full time. I kind of double as general manager of our race team as well, and do all of our own sponsorship sales and dealing and all that. So I really enjoy the business aspect of it as well. So I think there's a long future for me in motorsports. Obviously, driving a car is the ultimate thrill, right? And
yeah.
But if I was able to be in a position, and this is one thing that Ken's talked about too. Ken's and it was so cool to see this interest of mine and Ken's aligned, because I think it's so important. Is Ken's really interested in bringing up young talent. And what does the future of rallycross look like, and who are the future stars of rallycross? And Ken and I, that was one of the first conversations we had that it just really kind of took on a mind of its own, because we're both so passionate about having the opportunity to give young guys that just work their butts off, right? Like, obviously motorsports is all about financial contribution at this point, and I hate that for kids. I hate that, especially for the talented kids that don't have those resources. So one of the things that Ken and I have talked about in the big picture, depending on how far this program goes and ARX taking off, is what does it look like for the next generation of rallycross, and how can we be a part of that? So that's one of the most exciting things for my future, to be able to be a part of something like that.
How do you feel about where the sport is now? Because it feels like in the last few years there's been a bit of a wave of momentum behind it, and it's getting more popular in the States.
Yeah, I think obviously it's a year of transition this year, right? We had a blast in our time with GRC, but unfortunately that time's come to an end. So we're really looking forward to what's next. I think it's kind of one of those things where one group takes it to a certain level, and then they kind of pass the reins on to the next, and they keep it going. And it's unfortunate to see it kind of come to a head the way it did, but at the same token, the future of rallycross in the United States looks incredibly strong, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's going to shape up.
Was part of the appeal for you, at least, kind of the fact that they're going to have a Canadian round? So for you, I imagine that probably helps out with sponsors.
Well, whenever there's a Canadian round, it's just going to be a hell of a fun event, because we're going to party. Right?
There you go.
So yeah, that's definitely part of the appeal for me. It was so cool. So one of the highlights of my career last year was it was actually the week after the Canadian race that I ended up winning last year in Ottawa, and one of the GRC officials that was up in race control, took a videotape on her cell phone of the crowd cheer every time I went by late in the race. And to hear the crowd cheer overcome the sounds of the engines and everything every time I went by was pretty humbling. It was a pretty cool thing to see. So to have all my countrymen, if you want to call it that, behind me, and hopefully we can do the same over in Trois-Rivières this year. I'm pretty excited about it.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what this new series is like, Steve.
Me too. It's gonna be interesting.
All right. Well, I want to thank Steve Arpin again for taking time out of his busy, I won't call it an off season because he hasn't really had much downtime, but busy schedule to talk to me. As he said, Rallycross is in a transitionary period right now in the United States, but it sounds like Steve's confident, and I certainly am, that the sport will succeed on its merits. Anybody who's watched a Rallycross event, whether it's WRX, GRC, one of the GRC events that ran at the X Games, they can tell you there's nothing that's not exciting about it. It's quick races. You can't not hold your attention for 6 laps. Fast cars. They accelerate faster than Formula One cars. And I'm not saying that as hyperbole. They accelerate faster than Formula One cars. There's a video up from Top Gear Barbados where Ken Block actually raced Lewis Hamilton. Granted, it was a tight circuit, didn't play the Formula One cars, but impressive nonetheless. And just the beating they can take. The fact that these cars can run on tarmac, on suspension, over jumps. Tanner Faust said it when I interviewed him last year, and I agree 110%. Kids love these cars when they come out to races because they look like if a kid designed a racetrack and just threw some Hot Wheels on it, it would be going over jumps, it would be going over dirt, it would be doing anything imaginable that everybody else would say isn't possible. And that's why I personally love Rallycross. It appeals to the inner child in all of us. And so we'll probably be talking more about Steve over the next coming year as we start to see that partnership between Lowenbro and Hoonigan flesh out. I'm looking forward to seeing what they have coming down the pipeline. Steve's talked about getting to sit in on those meetings with Ken, and I can only imagine how that must have been. I got to talk to Ken last year, at the beginning of this year maybe. He was out in SEMA, and I spoke to him over the phone to pick his brain about Gymkhana 10 and the Amazon series that he has coming out. And he's a really, really thoughtful guy, Ken, and he has a lot of creative ideas, and it was really interesting to get to hear sort of his insight about the creative process, because he's a guy he's a fast racer, but he also really understands sort of driving for a camera, and how to appeal to people using digital media. And with Steve, you have a very personable guy as well. I've never not had a great conversation with Steve, so I think the two of them together are going to be a force to be reckoned with as far as furthering the cause of rallycross in the United States, and in the case of Steve, up north in Canada as well. They had a GRC round there, as we mentioned in the interview with Steve. They're having an ARX round there, so I'm sure it will be easy to get Canadian fans to go to those races. Why would they not want to go support one of their countrymen who is going to be arguably one of the top drivers in the series? I also can't wait to see, I know Steve mentioned that him and Ken are both really interested in recruiting younger talent into the sport, and I think that that's great, because typically in North America, people think of racing, they only think of stock cars, and rallycross is something that's very different, and in my opinion, it would appeal to a lot of people who sort of turn their nose up at NASCAR. Not that I think that that's justified, but you want to grab those people and get their eyes on the TV as well. And so I think seeing what they can do as far as getting people to pursue the rallycross route and also recruiting young talent themselves, that'll be interesting, because I know in the last year in GRC, we had young drivers like Cabot Bigham coming up through the ranks, Mitchell DeJong, and those guys were very, very fast, very competitive, and they're young. And so to see young talent like that interested in coming up this rank, it's encouraging. All right, and with that, I think I will wrap up this first edition of the Meta Motorsport Podcast. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, anybody who bothered to stick around until this point. Once again, my name is Pat Mackesy. You can follow me on Twitter at Pat Mackesy, and I will look forward to seeing you back for another edition of the Meta Motorsport Podcast.